Her expression wasn't rigid, but careful nonetheless, having, the beautiful associate, almost, almost but slowly, gradually, in response to my own sudden comprehension, turned her head slightly inward towards us, that her eyes, still beyond the immigrant couple, were not now so distant away, that I too became well within the clearest angles of her peripheral vision, while she maintained the explicit, concentrated sight of her primary focal point, still at a safe distance from my entreating eyes, and portrayed, for as long as she could, oblivion toward the context that surrounded us, as yet unspoken, but that whistled now loudly between our three parties. I studied the young lady over some short, thoughtless interval. Then I shifted my eyes onto the couple to my right. Yet while the frames of their torsos still faced the beautiful young associate behind the counter, their heads were already turned upon me, and their eyes were ready to receive mine, as though they had anticipated that I should soon be confused. Their faces, both faces of the immigrant couple, were blatantly blank, as the power of sodomites is comprised in withholding premise from the air. And I beheld them for but a short lapse before I reverted my attention back to the pretty young associate. She too, though, during the short instance of diversion in which my focus went between her and the couple and then from them quickly back unto her, had shifted her sights unto me, while the rest of her had remained put, and to receive my eyes had also made ready her own. This time, however, our eyes had none of the intrigue of the first two, and which I had misinterpreted in the third. Necessity was implied somewhere therein. She seemed by her look to be trying to either convey something or ascertain, and in a moment suddenly I'm consumed by this overwhelming sense of déjà vu, that again many seconds go by, with me there but not at all present. The sensation is thick, is intense and thick, like the onset of a chemical state, almost like awaking, having just prior fainted, and somehow, for just a short span, it's like I'm catatonic. So presently detached am I from the scene at hand, so withdrawn within myself, trying to locate this strange impression, this feeling of precedent, that temporarily it's as though I cannot so much as see the images in front of me, though my eyes are open upon them. My immersed efforts were for naught, though, as its source I could not trace, hindered by and still within experience and place. Within the short passage of some indistinct yet definitive time frame, but as though a magician had snapped his fingers, my déjà vu arrest was less diminished than disrupted, and I was displaced back to reality, cognizant, once again, that I was still in a public place and looking to proceed, and I resumed the display of my stupefied state within scene. It wasn't long from there that my renewed skepticism compelled me to search around and circumvent the entire surrounding area, exaggerating or performing an appropriate physical pantomime, but only for the sake of the cameras overhead. Of my own incredulity, as though desperate to verify another witness who should also see the same absurdity presented me. In so doing, by chance, I managed to catch the eye of another employee, another young lady, who was replacing clothes to their proper racks not far away in the quadrant of my panoramic reference behind my right shoulder. Our eye contact, from afar, having related and received, the second young lady propelled towards the counter, post-haste, and henceforth rang me up my $5 footwear, prior that I then exited the store, and I departed on my return walk to my aunt's. I couldn't figure it out in the moment, but that nervous secret, it had been shown me before. I'd felt aforetime, like a recurred dream I had passed through, I had experienced, I had participated in that hazy sequence. I'd been there. I've been bound by that bubble before, but where? And when? How, in what capacity, and why? It troubled me almost all the walk back. Somewhere around the bridge, though, not far from my aunt's, it hit me, That same thing, that very same thing, that same episode played before me in August, comprised of the same cast. The old hateful Hispanic couple and the blue-eyed beauty behind the cash register. And Monday was merely a rerun. Before the Inn Club pulled the rug out from under me, after letting me walk upon it for a month, all but hired, for but the start of the next training course, I was in the midst of parceling together a dramatic new wardrobe in anticipation and to accommodate the drastic new opportunity upon which I was about to embark. Honest Indian. Bought a business suit and everything. Nice shoes, ties, button-down shirts, the whole 9 yards, or 27 feet. I totally invested myself, along with a substantial portion of all my remaining money. It was August, about a week before the Inn Club's HR, headquartered in another state, informed me via email that they had decided not to conduct a company training class this quarter after all, that they were sorry for any inconvenience that their decision may have caused me having already waited patiently for a month on the promise of a position within the paid group training class, which was to begin at the end of August. And they wanted to thank me for my interest in being in with, the Inn Club. And cite this in the encyclopedia in typical reference to this remorseless American economic. Fuck you, from someone somewhere else. I was at the same Yorkville Goodwill store looking for anything that I still lacked enough of, which was any and everything, really. Slim pickings, but I found a decent black leather belt. Most all other stuff I bought, though, I purchased new. Swear. It was a lazy summer weekday afternoon, and the customers in the store were scarce. But that time also at checkout. That time also, me, the sole buyer, waiting in line behind those same two immigrants, who, that time in August also, I had left thinking were merely hugely rude. But it was that same husband, that same sharp, scrawny, weathered, hateful cockroach. His eyes without the distinction of iris. Just two dark holes. Two dark dime-sized beads lurking in murky white. The way he looked at me, clear with scheme, but with face void of purpose. That same wife, that same chubby, ugly, unfuckable Chihuahua pug, who I'm sure helps her husband to loiter unassuming to all other onlookers, and to recollection likewise, if not more likely otherwise presently disregarded, except unto whom he creeps unto and whispers his dickless threats, insomuch that he's a tic-tac-dick hick, and disgusting, like his wife, and so ascribes to the vile behaviors of needle dictitude, or as apparent by his vaguely veiled intimidation of a young girl, vulnerable in a moment to voice and visage, for the still unarmed social pretense and as yet unspoiled amicable assumption of this still as yet more auspicious middle American anthropology, the hushed hiss of which hypothetical, if you keep quiet then you won't get hurt, or something unto such effect, similarly incentivizing silent compliance, presumably, he performed prior to my entrance onto the stage, which I but and can only insinuate, and which cowardice exemplifies the spineless tactic of dicklessness, which quality of being without a dicklessness, as we all know, but for the sake of clarification, is synonymous to and interchangeable with, in terminology, with needle dictitude. That time in August, too, behind the register, and presently the only cashier, that girl, that same beautiful girl. And that August day also, after a long, unsettling silence. That look, that same cautious, uncertain look. How that she seemed privy to something. Overheard perhaps of my long complaint, the conspiracy that's closely corresponsive and concentric around, yet conveniently only to me, both conspicuous in a moment and conjured like psychosis, and the silent secrecy of which subjection I'm powerless to combat or overcome, as I know not who or what, but only that it is. That look, and within it, as though by some blunt means it was communicated or demonstrated unto or observed or overheard by her what it is. The approaching passer in my path that brandishes against my way I go, like premonition of peril unperceived, and disdains to lift its visor or put his rival rider off his guard. The faceless prerogative that impedes me and obstructs still my every prosperity. That look, which subtext to me read only of tangible tension, yet conveyed therein something definitive, howbeit unto only her anonymous surmise to my subtle harassment, that is ceaseless to me. But which weight was twice now, after the episode that they reran for me just this Monday past, imposed upon us both and shared between us, she and I. That look, that cryptic look, that divulging yet desiderate look. That esoteric look, exhibiting and evoking, expressing explicitly only its enigmatic entreat. She received me with it in August, as I approached the line comprised only of the couple, and then looked a while away. That awful little savage, and whatever that thing was that traveled at its side, and assigning between them unto which designation is whose, I suppose I'll let you choose. Once they were in front of the register, back still in August, that is, at some point under some pretense, and in what needs have been no louder than with whispered voice, as I heard not then either, but the same strange, strained, sustained silence, they must have bade the blue-eyed beauty, as they would also months later this Monday last, to summon her manager, for whom they apparently waited, and which pretense provided means to monopolize the young lady's ministration, while also it forbade her interaction with me. However, in August, too, as my confusion grew, a random roving associate happened our way, noticed our delay, and saved the day, sparing the young lady and I any more until November Monday this week, of whatever bullshit that horrible couple inflicted upon us, so that ultimately I would remain ignorant on that prior occasion also as to what cumbrance held us in limbo, for that the other associate who had conveniently chanced by, a young man, in no time at all, he scanned my item and let me pay, then told me to enjoy my day before I left the store and drove away. It made an impression on me, though, even at the time, the first adverse experience, August at the Goodwill store, how that I could sense the heavy pretense in the strain of shrill silence which the couple seemed somehow to impose, the feel of their connected periphery, and how they focused on neither me nor the blonde directly, yet somehow kept carefully vigilant between us both. But it would so hardly by now still resonate, if not for its second take. In fact, not many days after its occurrence, I even cited the incident of the August Goodwill, audibly to the open air, and in argument made unto the odometer as I drove by myself, alone, in my own car, that I paid for, with money that I earned. It was in the midst of a vicious, venomous soliloquy that would prove pivotal. I mentioned it in reference to, and as example of the particularly hostile breed of conquistador that has thoroughly infested Chicagoland suburbia. Because that my original August interpretation of the couple at the Goodwill store was just that they were incredibly rude and utterly inconsiderate, qualities by no means atypical to the cheapest rate, lowest price labor force of extra-national aliens around here. But only since this latest November Monday was the couple sinister. And I brought them up among the streaming brimstone of that soliloquy later on, which angry rant would prove pivotal, as evidence of the greater point that I exposited onto the rearview mirror, in lieu of the unswayable odometer's obstinate opinion, which was barely moved by my bellowing, but remained constant, retaining the rate of its change. Mainly that their entire male half is of a primitive and contentious and violent proclivity, and altogether absent of academic notion, which impetus to expel them all, their men that is, and Godspeed to the project, was in some small way incited, but in no small way supported by muchachas de las Latinas, by mis amigos pero para tiempo, by the maids at the inn, who commonly attested to the violent inclination among the men of their people, and around here they have no manners at all, but are intentionally impolite, nor in courtesy they hold open doors, or yield ever a parking spot, or a single place ahead in line at the store, even so much as to feign grace and offer someone else go ahead, or like at the Goodwill store, never once throughout, proposing that the young lady perhaps shortly help me, that I might scan and pay, then quickly go away, rather than I wait 20 minutes because of them, but rather they made sure that I could not interact with the girl. And everything about their men is macho, and to a degree both blatant and painful with overcompensation. And everything with their men on some pathetic level becomes a big dick contest, which, ironically, if they're of like origin or much similar to the prototype of this local organism, they can never win, but for the stiffer shaft and shinier of their metal manhoods, which weaponry, knife or gun, seems their most endowed measure, and their only means to be seen and treated and taken seriously at all, as though they were actually, in fact, male. And so, as per my more pertinent point, driving one distempered afternoon 3 months ago and more, talking to myself alone in my car, which, remind you, I bought, that runs on gas that I pay for. But whiles that driving it I did, in mine opine, as I expounded on some certain matters of grave and sensitive, yet dire import, in course through my cogent lecture, presuming audience on the speaker's behalf, and in the vapor of my viper's breath, and in my venom brought to boil, in the sear of sharp and insightful and well-stated thesis unto a justified resentment, if not hostility, if not animosity, among the taxpayers of this hospitable American hospice asylum, and fosterer, and adopterer, and quarterer, and bearer of the dispossessed, I gave worthy rebuke unto this ungrateful invader, how that, as far as I can figure it, the caucus Caucasian can accept and bear the blame for the history of America's destiny manifested, while they still yet have the country, and be made afraid to defend their own interests for sins that aren't theirs, and forfeit their American heritage unto an hombre who hates them, and permit themselves to be convinced that they're not allowed to claim ownership of this place, when each and all and every other would, and will if they could, if one won't, this great land, unto which great land, but pushed by the wind, our people were all once displaced, but because that people who were once ago defeated of fate would like the inheritors of victory to now roll over, as though we today should be ashamed, because of how the past, when the future that's now today, give tomorrow away, and fail to fight for the future that shall be when once today is past, and so allow hateful hordes to come over here and feel justified being pestilent and unto native-born citizens of this sovereign that unites the better public of this magnanimous land, and worry for what the world may say, but rather give this great notion away civic, and unto such as have neither knowledge or care, and how much less pride and gratitude and respect, for the monumental stones that underlay the foundations of this lofty thing liberty, to go ahead and let the bottom bidder get comfortable in their new place that they did not pay for, that they did not build or pay for, treating with contempt the people of their generous asylum, whose lineage became this proud heritage and made this land, this law, like a light upon a hill, which people weren't the ones that caused such anti-Anglo sentiment against themselves, and whose lives are also shitty, like everyone else's, everywhere, except for a statistically insignificant portion of any given populace. Or this still yet decent demographic, American, and that's American across pigment spectrum, it can resolve itself ready, if need be, to toss some trunks at this uninvited rival and say, for when you get to the grand, towels on the other side. Just saying.